Welcome everyone to the lunchtime lecture of the Royal United Services Institute for Defence and Security Studies, New South Wales, our usual lunchtime lecture. Our first one for the year, so Happy New Year. It's great to see so many people here for the first lecture. Welcome. Can I also just make a quick welcome too? I'm told that we have Ian and Carol with us today, and Carol is Charles Bean's granddaughter. So welcome, Carol. And the other thing I'll just mention by way of a quick thing is the library's prepared a reading list of books we have in the library relating to today's topic of military education. That the books are available, of course, in the library. The reading list's available, I believe, up the back there, available online and available in the library. So if you want to read some more about the topic, there's some information there. So what I'd like to do now is just to hand over to Ron Lyons and invite Ron, our Vice President and Chair of the Events Committee, to introduce today's speaker. Ron.
Thanks, Kim, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the first of our lecture series for 2026. The title of today's lecture is The Education of Military Officers in Military History, and it'll be presented by one of our members, Dr. Mesut Uyar. The famous quote by the philosopher George Santayana that those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it was given a bit of a tweak by Winston Churchill as those who do not learn from the past are doomed to repeat it. But the premise is very clear. Failing to understand past events and mistakes ensures they'll happen again. The aim of the topic today is to illustrate the techniques and the value of teaching military history to officers as a means of influencing their strategic understanding, their tactical ability in their careers as commanders, staff officers and instructors. Dr. Uyar is a Turkish-Australian military historian. He's a former Turkish Army officer who has had both operational and staff experience. He's taken part in UN peace support operations in Georgia and was wounded in Afghanistan. He is currently the University of New South Wales Ottoman Fellow and Associate Professor in the History Faculty. He's authored numerous publications, including The Ottoman Army in World War I, The Ottoman Defence Against the Anzac Landing, 25th of April 1915, which is part of the Australian Army History Unit campaign series, and will shortly have another publication dealing with the Ottoman defence in Palestine in World War I. Would you please welcome Dr. Mesut Uyar to the podium.
Thank you. Before starting my talk, I would like to say a bit about my credit expertise related with professional military education. I am a graduate of Turkish Military Academy in 1991. I was commissioned as a light infantry officer, performed platoon leaders, company commander, battalion commander duties, and at the same time I spent 11 years as a professor at the Turkish Military Academy. I was lucky enough to work in different foreign military educational institutions, including ATFA here in Canberra, but also in Macedonia, the Voin Academia Mihailo Apostol. In Azerbaijan, I spent some time in West Point, America. I participated lots of academic activities dealing with professional military education. But today, I will talk more about the importance of the military history within the educational system and some of current problems affecting nearly all military academies, including the Australian Defence Forces Academy. Okay, let's start. When I was in primary school, students, this movie appeared and I was immediately hooked. I like it a lot. But one thing I couldn't understand, the Nazis' quest for world hegemony by capturing a sacred object, the Ark of Covenant. I find it very silly, idiotic. Even at that age, 8 or 9 years old, I said, okay, that is ridiculous. Although the movie is good, but the general plot lacking. Until in 2022. In 2022, I was the leader of a project group to find about the locations of Alexander the Great's the first victory against the Persians, Granicus. So while trying to find the exact location of the battlefield, I discovered that back in the day, late 19th century, early 20th century, the chief of German General Staff, the famous Schlieffen, the General Schlieffen, Marshal Schlieffen, tried to find about the secret behind the military genius of Alexander. So he really believed that you can get valuable lessons from military history, you can compress them into a small pill, and when you swallow that small pill, you will get over all the military problems. So he was very keen to discover the elements of military genius behind Alexander the Great. So he sent a small delegation of German officers to the battlefields of the Alexander the Great. So this group first visited Issus, now in southern Turkey. They couldn't able to reach Arbela, so they returned back and visited Granicus, which is near to Gallipoli, modern day Turkey. So this group prepared a book about their findings, and the main idea is to have a recipe for success for the German officers, because they are planning to unleash a major war in the immediate future. So, in a sense, the movie was right. So the Germans really keen to find some superiority from the history. And this is one of the issues related with military history. So most of the generals, officers, government officials, high officials approach military history a kind of a useful field to find a silver bullet or a recipe for success, a checklist that when you fill up all of them, you will achieve your military victory. And there's a kind of a mistaken, in quotation marks, mistaken understanding that military history is a serious part of professional military education. Of course, the graduates of the military academies know that this is not true, but most people believe that if you are looking for serious military history education, the obvious points would be military higher educational institutions. And in appearance, all armies, all armed forces paying special attention to show that they are actually spending substantial time to read and learn from military history. I mean, most armies have within their institutional body a division or subdivision dealing with military history. Some armies even have official military history writing sections, not in Australia, but in most other armies. They have a special subdivision within their general staff dealing with official history, military writing, and most developed nations every year or every 5 years release a reading list to their officers, NCOs, and their soldiers. I took a look at the current one, 2025, the Australian Chief of Army Professional Study Guide. And when we take a look at the front piece, it says it's a duty. So the top-ranking general in Australian Army saying to the officers, warrant officers, NCOs and soldiers, it is your duty to read. So what can he do more? He released a reading list, asked all the institutions to have these books within their library or electronic database, and order all the personnel wearing uniforms or not read, as if a kind of a prophet saying that you need to read it. Okay, let me briefly scratch on what we are dealing when we talk about military history. As you know, the military history started in front of the campfires, veterans coming together, talking about the past glories, the battles, the heroes, the villains, the victories, defeats, how they suffered, lots of things together. And I believe you are also doing it with your friends in restaurants, in institutions like this, talking about your experiences. And these experiences initially transmitted in songs, in poems. Homer's poem of Iliad or Odyssey is actually consists of combination of lots of stories told by the veterans before. And it is no great wonder that the generals also would like to transmit their victories by making use of professional authors to write their successes, victories, achievements. And some of them, including the Roman Emperor Caesar, prefer to write it by himself. Anyone trying to study Latin language should have to read Caesar's famous Gallic Wars. He didn't believe that a professional author can able to transmit his glory, so he himself write it down. And these deeds of kings, a kind of propaganda, also provide us one of the foundation stones of the military history. And of course, with the development of time, each military needed some kind of field manuals, some books that concentrate most of the experience they acquire in the meantime. Previously, the oral tradition was dominant, so everybody learning their trade from their senior soldiers, NCOs, officers, by doing it, getting all the information orally. But later on, the written tradition started to develop, so we come across the first military manuals. And these military manuals basically depend upon the past experiences to disseminate the military knowledge to the youngsters. And professional military education initially started with the nobility, the aristocracy. So the sons of the aristocratic families learn about being a professional officers from their fathers, uncles, their relatives. And even in some developed countries like in Germany, they open up small schools to train the sons of the aristocrats for their future military career. And in the meantime, soldiers commissioned from the ranks by doing it, by following the old traditional oral education, oral tradition, learning everything by doing it, learning it from their senior friends, their commanders. However, with the development of the military technology, these both systems, the aristocratic training or on-the-job training, failed to provide some of the demands for engineering and artillery especially. Previously, every army hired civilian engineers to deal with these problems. There were, especially in Europe, some Italian families that you hire them to construct cannons, to construct bridges, fortifications. And these civilian engineers also come with you to military campaigns to position the artillery pieces or dig up earthen fortifications or dig up tunnels under the walls of the fortifications to destroy them. But starting with 18th century, they discovered that hiring civilians, especially foreigners, especially Italians, not a good idea. So they decided to create that capacity within their institutional body. And that was the reason of the opening of the first military engineering schools, initially in France and later imitated by others. But in the meantime, while the artillery and engineering officers getting a proper education, infantry and cavalry continue on their well-established tradition of on-the-job training. But with the French Revolution and Napoleonic Wars, everybody came to the understanding that there is a need for providing academic education to the infantry and cavalry officers also, and that was with the opening of the French Military Academy Saint-Cyr in 1802. And quickly this was imitated and similar academies open up in other countries also. The main reason behind this military education was to molding, shaping the body and the mind of the future officers. This started with 17th century Dutch military manuals, how to use the firearms effectively, the drill manuals, shaping the physical body. Later, with the French military engineering schools, it transformed into shaping the minds of the officers also. So when you talk about shaping the mind, 18th century and 19th century, early 19th century, everybody thought about scientific subjects, mathematics, physics, and to a certain extent, chemistry. So, in reality, it was the French École Polytechnique that became the model for all professional military education. So, when you are talking about professional military education, that means you are talking about engineering or semi-engineering. So most of the military academies right now putting more emphasis on engineering education than the liberal arts, social sciences, humanities. Of course, in every academy, there is a small percentage of students getting humanities or social sciences education, but most others getting engineering education. So when you are talking about European style professional military education, that means you are talking about engineering education or semi-engineering education. And for example, the famous West Point, modeled not after Saint Cyr, it was modeled after École Polytechnique. And ours, ATFA, and before that RMC Dantzon, also modeled after the École Polytechnique. Of course, they said that we are modeling after West Point, but West Point modeled after École Polytechnique, so unintentionally they just follow up the French military engineering educational system. But that was not always the same reaction. The Americans opened up West Point imitating École Polytechnique, but the British decided that they already had public schools providing good quality education to aristocracy and rich families establishment. So there's no need to open 3 or 4 years long military academy. They decided to open 1 year long officer schools, building up the public school background. And that is also true for the Prussian system. Just like the public schools, the Germans at that time had gymnasium, much better, tougher high schools. So instead of opening military academies, they open officers' schools, officer Schule, and the system is still going on in Germany like that. 1870, when the Prussians defeated the French, their military system transformed into the ideal model for everyone, even for the French. So all of a sudden, the French engineering-based military academies lost their appeal, and everybody tried to imitate the Germans. But because the Germans had officer Schule, the officer schools, there's nothing to imitate. What the other militaries imitate was the German War Academy, Kriegsakademie. Because according to what they understand from the Prussian victories against the Germans, it was the German general staff officers who achieved the victory. So they try to find out how they can repeat the Prussian success by getting the Prussian military academy, war academy, into their systems. And they discovered that the Germans paying a lot of attention about military history. And they are paying attention to military history, not only reading lots of books, but trying to apply the military history by using different methods. And a standard product of the German military educational system was no other than Schlieffen. Schlieffen tried to use military history in planning for the future wars. And when he read books about Hannibal's the famous victory against the Romans, Khan, he immediately said to himself, okay, I find a solution, Eureka. All I need to do to put the French or other enemies in the position of the Romans and use the successful template of Hannibal. And if you pay attention to the Schlieffen's famous plan against the invasion of France, you will find out the elements of Hannibal within the planning system. So for the Germans, military history was something practical, a useful tool to solve the current problems. And when the other nations try to imitate the Germans, they also knowingly or unknowingly started to see military history something that they can use as a magic silver bullet to deal with the problems they were facing. However, within the Germany, there were others like Hans Delbrück saying that this is ridiculous. This is, in quotation mark, Scheiße, bullshit. You cannot use military history as a practical tool. You can make use of military history as to accumulate an intellectual background so that you can able to see the current problems with a perspective. And if you read more, if you work out military history by using your maps, field studies, staff rights, etc., you may have a better background to solve the modern problems. So for Hans Delbrück, military history is something, a division of the academic history system, humanities branch. So you should write the military history academically by using all the academic methods and use the military history as a kind of an intellectual background for the officers. Unfortunately, this is something that's still missing. So most generals, most officers still see the military history something practical to solve the problems, providing checklists, providing formulas, providing recipes. They are not seeing military history something that feed their brains, provide a military intellectual background so that they can able to see the things better. And the early years of 20th century was the golden period for the military history. If you take a look at French Saint-Cyrs curricula, you will see that the French officers receive substantial hours of military history education. And when RMC Dantrun was founded in 1911, after decades-long discussions to have or not to have a military academy to educate the Australian and New Zealand officers, they modeled their system after West Point and the Canadian RMC Kingston. They prefer not to talk about RMC Kingston for various reasons, political and other reasons. They said that we will model our school after West Point. And when they open up Dantrun, 2/3 of the civilian educational part consists of scientific issues, math, physics, chemistry, and some engineering. And the military history was a small part of it, unlike the French or the Germans, and it was delivered by a professor of English. They thought that an English professor can able to provide the military history part without any problem. All he needs to do, just read a book before the lesson and just recite it. At that time, at the beginning of 20th century, for the military, for the professional military educational institutions, when you say military history deals with all these things: history, strategy, military leadership and decision making, military organization, moral, motivation, ethics, doctrine, tactics, military technology, logistics and transportation. All these were part of the military history education in professional military educational institutions, in military academies. However, the First World War seriously shake the understanding of professional military education, because First World War was really the first industrial war that most developed nations had to face. They lost not thousands but hundreds of thousands, millions in so many battles, and they discovered that their well-trained officers disappear in the first months of the war. So they had to commission officers from civilians. So it was, the First World War was actually a kind of a battle between quality and quantity. And unfortunately, quantity became victorious. So in 1918, most militaries decided that, okay, it is not a good idea to invest so much time, effort for academic components of professional military education. You see, we conscripted civilians, they passed through a 3 months, 6 months officer training course training, and they became very good officers, good enough to win the war. So why to invest so many time and money for professional military education? Because it is very expensive. There is no need, most people said. And they also face a new model, the Soviet model. 1917, Russian Revolution, Russian Civil Wars, a new power born out of the ruins of Russia, the Soviet Union. And the Soviets, although they put a lot of emphasis on Marxist-Leninist philosophy, lots of talks about philosophy, etc., they approach military education hands-on. They created completely military application schools for infantry, for cavalry, for armor, air force, etc. And in a single year, in several months, they commissioned officers. And this became another model. And after studies during 1920s and 30s, if you pay attention, the RMC Danton's most problematic period in its long history is 1920s and 30s. The Second World War started, and it transformed our understanding of war and military history a lot, because for the first time, science became a serious part of the war effort. They invented new sub-scientific disciplines like operational research. Operational research started to find solutions to transport thousands of soldiers, tons of military equipment, ammunition, etc., from one location to another. It was designed to find solutions for strategic air bombardment of Japan and Germany by the Americans. So even a new subdiscipline invented for the war effort, and additionally thousands of scholars, professors, people with PhDs, MAs recruited, and especially in America and Britain, they were employed relative to their scientific expertise. So these guys wearing uniforms work mostly according to their scientific expertise, to support the war effort. And some of them, after the end of the war, continue to work on war and military subjects because it turned out to be very transformative for some of these academics. And when they release from the military, return back to their universities or institutions or companies, they continue to work on war or war-related subjects. And some new subdisciplines born out of the Second World War, strategic studies. Because of the atomic bomb, some scientists coming from branches of science and also some political scientists like Henry Kissinger found out that conventional military history completely useless because atomic weapons change everything. So they decided to release the strategy from the military history and created a subdiscipline under the international relations. And there were others like birth of the military sociology. Morris Yanowitz, Samuel Huntington created the military sociology, and they focus on moral, ethics, organization, the soldiers, the civilians, the effects of wars, armed forces on society, and all sorts of other issues coming with them. And we come across management. Management born late 19th century, early 20th century, but it became a fashionable subject after the Second World War, and it focused on management, business administration, leadership, organization. For example, when you talk about this flat army issue, how to deal with some of the military organizational issues, you are not looking to military history any longer. You are looking to management to understand it. And also related with leadership. The interesting thing is management born out of the business make use of military armed forces, borrow from military leadership, military organizational system, military experiences, and try to sell this to their civilian customers as leadership, as organizational system. But interestingly, they also started to sell their products to the military also. They get it from the military, and all of a sudden, military transformed from a source to a customer. Okay, take a look at this. Showing uniform guys on the cover of the Fortune magazine, saying that you can learn something from military to gain more money, to earn more money, make use of your businesses more successful by tapping into military experiences. Okay, let's take a look at what has remaining for the military history education within the professional military educational system. Strategy gone, military leadership and decision-making gone, organization, moral ethics, military technology, logistics and transportation, all of them gone. What is left behind is history and, to a certain extent, operational art, doctrine and tactics. While the field of military history getting narrower, the academic military historians lost interest into conventional military history, and new fashions born within the academic military history, like the new military history approach, war and society, war and culture, war studies, war and gender. With the academic military historians moving into more fashionable academic subjects, armed forces lost their confidence to the academic military historians, and their loss of confidence affected the professional military education also. And management came in front and took over most of the subjects of military history previously functioning. It transformed into and converted. Because management means providing recipes, how to do books, what to do, checklists, magic bullets to do businesses, private businesses. So management as a discipline, well formed to serve to the generals, the military leaders, by providing ready-made recipes. They don't pay any attention about military intellectualism. They don't pay any attention about intellectual background for the officers. They are well focused on market, providing how to do books, how to do courses. Okay, 1911, I took it from a French military history book, providing solutions to military historical problems. Okay, take a look. Management just repeating what the military history education doing early 20th century. Okay, what can you gain from Waterloo battle for your private business? And with the end of the Cold War, a new element introduced into conflicts and wars. Culture. War of culture, war of civilizations. If you are a fan of Huntington, if you believe that there's a conflict going on between civilizations, that means you need to get an understanding of religion, different civilizations, different cultures. And Americans started to invest a lot of money and effort. Okay, let us think about an ideal armed forces. Having scholars, well-established professors providing advice to the commanding general. Having military historians, field historians moving with the military units, recording everything happening on the ground. Having research teams working with the field armies, divisions, regiments, providing their commanders solutions to their problems, field problems, academic solutions. Would it be good to have all these guys with you? Like having Aristotle with Alexander the Great, having been on the field, not only recording what is happening, but at the same time providing advice to the generals, to the officers, what to do, how to do. Having research teams like Napoleon bringing scientists to Egypt. Well, actually, the Americans had it. In 2009, the US general commanding the ISAF, the all-war effort in Afghanistan, had all sorts of academic advisors. He had field historians attached to divisions, American divisions. He had human terrain teams working with the units, collecting lots of information and trying to solve military problems by providing academic expertise. And in addition to these all scholars, he had a huge staff. Okay, I know it because I was there. You see the red arrow? That small guy was me. That was the opening of IJC, the military staff of the war effort in Afghanistan in 2009. And this was the famous McChrystus macaroni salad. This was created by scholars. American Army spent millions to create this salad. And I was, as a general staff officer with the regional RC capital, the division responsible of the Kabul city and surrounding, for every military operation as a staff officer, while giving the 3-star American general our planned military operation, I needed to point out what subjects within this macaroni salad this particular military operation will provide. So my background as a historian helped me a lot. I was assigned from Military Academy to Afghanistan. I was an associate professor at that time. And my expertise in academic jargon helped a lot. The American generals liked me. They decorated me. I received a medal, lots of certificates, because by acting as a military staff officer, I also able to input some academic jargon into the operational order, so they like it. It shows that the Turks really understood the subject. And if you do not believe me, please watch this movie. Okay, of course, this is just making fun of the American war effort in Afghanistan. But believe me, when I first watched this movie, while laughing with the jokes, I feel a pain in my heart because I passed through this. It was so anarchic that, I mean, you can only tell it by telling jokes. And it was no great wonder that the Americans and their allies lost the war effort. Okay, what can we do? At the end of the Cold War, starting with West Point, imitated by other military academies, they said that, okay, let us return back to the safe waters of engineering education. The Americans invented a new type of engineering called it systems engineering by making use of industrial engineering, business administration, and engineering management. And right now, systems engineering is a serious part of West Point academic system, academic curricula. And some other military academies repeated that. Or officers training course, short military applicatory education, hands-on education, like the Israelis are doing it. A kind of a Prussian model, a kind of a Soviet model. The Israel system is very similar to the Soviet model of 1920s and 30s. But the issue is, what kind of an officer we are looking for? Are we looking for an officer that understands all aspects of the battlefield, but at the same time having the necessary background? Or are we looking for specialists specialized on a very certain aspect of the war? Okay, right now, because of the new military technology, it is very difficult to get an understanding for some of the systems, some of the weapon systems, communication, computer systems, all sorts of new military paraphernalia. Do we want officers superb in computer engineering, electronics? Do we want officers that can understand all this technological marvel, even produce some of the weapons and new systems? Or we are looking for a generalist officers that can make use of the military technology to solve particular problems of the battlefield? This is the essence, actually. Okay, unfortunately, we don't have an easy solution. First, in none of the developed nations, being an officer is a popular choice. The new generations, youngsters, just don't want to be an officer. The ones volunteering to be officers are either coming from very poor financial or socio-cultural backgrounds, seeing officership as a kind of a social advancement, earning their livelihood, because the other ones, having good educational backgrounds, prefer to get into fashionable jobs, fashionable subjects, getting good diplomas from universities, earning more money, enjoying life better than getting into the military hardship. Another issue is the officers that we are graduating not staying in the armed forces very long. 5 years, 10 years, they immediately jump to other jobs, and using their military diplomas, military experience as a kind of a good CV points. Like, punch the ticket, I did this, I'm a veteran, I'm an ex-captain, major, etc. And using all the credits coming from the being a veteran or being part of the military systems. In military academies, military professional military education institutions, balancing the military training and academic education is a serious issue. In an ordinary university, a student is taking 5 courses or 6 courses at most, sometimes less. For example, my daughter currently in Sydney Uni, double majors, and she took 2 courses last semester, 2 courses. But in a military academy, in addition to academic courses, the cadets have to take military-related courses, so the curriculum is more dense, more difficult. The students poorer in terms of educational qualification, facing daunting tests in comparison to the civilian universities. And there's always mandolin coming from armed forces, the general saying that, okay, we have a particular problem, we have drones, UAVs, so there should be some courses providing necessary information to the cadets for the future battlefield. And additionally, most of the cadets want the things they are learning in the courses have some practical application. Okay, you are teaching me this subject. Will I, as an infantry lieutenant, able to make use of this subject with my platoon? Will I able to make use of this information directly while performing my military job? Okay, we have one advantage. Although smartphones are destroying this, still our officers, soldiers, NCOs like to read something about the wars, the heroes, the battles, etc. Generally, they prefer less intellectual, less dense, easy to read, old-style pun books, popular mass-produced paperbacks, but still they read. And they like gaming, computer games. If you take a look at while traveling with buses, train, or in parks, in restaurants, you will see lots of youngsters playing games. And that is also true for the cadets, for the officers. They like to play games, and because of their military background, because wearing uniforms propel them to play more war games. And it's a big market right now. And we may make use of some of the old style application of the military history. Battlefield tours, staff rides. And these also put a new energy in interest. Taking the cadets, taking the officers, soldiers, NCOs together to a battlefield, having them examine the conditions, seeing it with their own eyes, and trying to find out something for the future, for their profession. However, we are still have to deal with our burden coming from the previous decades, from the previous centuries. Generals like engineering solutions, easy solutions, not thinking about the long term, middle term, but short term. Let us solve this problem first. There are lots of fashions affecting the military. Right now, drones, UAVs, artificial intelligence. The Australian Defence Forces spending money for artificial intelligence, something that they have difficulty to understand, and they are happy to spend money. But at the same time, they are closing down the libraries, saying that, okay, spending a few $1,000s for purchasing books looks very expensive, but they are happy to spend millions. I believe there are some AUKUS spotters here within the audience. They are happy to spend billions for American submarines that may not come. But they don't like to spend $10,000 per month to purchase books. I mean, books. Who are reading these books? They are expensive. They are allocating. They are occupying lots of space. They are happy to get rid of libraries. They are saying, we have digital libraries. You can reach your digital library everywhere with your phone, with your tablet. There's no need for books. But they are happy to spend billions for other technological things that they hope to solve all problems, make them happy. Okay, I don't want to continue more about this discussion. I hope we have enough time for questions. And if you are not happy with my lecture, you can throw your eggs and tomatoes, no problem.
Thank you, Mr. Now, we've got time for questions. As is our usual practice, would you please state your name and affiliation before asking your question, and not a long statement. Thank you.
Malcolm Brown, journalist and former serviceman. In the Vietnam War, traditional military principles were applied, and the problem was that the traditional military approaches of search and destroy and clearing areas and whatever else didn't even address the real strategic problem, was that they could not isolate South Vietnam as South Korea was isolated and eliminate the enemy. And all military education, you can talk about tactics, you can talk about fire support, you can talk about covering fire and everything, but what about the general overall strategic problem, which it has to be decided far the same as in Afghanistan, that the quest to bring about defeat the Taliban in Afghanistan was totally misconceived, because they couldn't overrun the entire population of Taliban who were going to be there at the end.
Question?
Okay, the short answer is, in Vietnam, Australia was a junior partner of the Americans. In Afghanistan, again, Australia, Turkey, and others were junior partners. So they had no means to affect the political aims of their major partner, America, because Australia had no political aims related with Vietnam other than not having a communist regime in Vietnam. And in Vietnam and Afghanistan, Australia had no means to affect the strategy. It was designed and carried out by the Americans. I mean, being a junior partner in a coalition war is very difficult, even if you know some of the things that you need to do. I mean, as a military historian, when I first arrived in Afghanistan in 2002, during the foundation of ISAF, I had lots of ideas, and I tried to spell it, but nobody paid any attention, because the Americans are so in hubris, saying that we know it, we already solved it. We already solved Afghanistan. The day I put my feet on Kabul airport, the Americans said that we already solved the Afghanistan problem. It's over. We are planning for another one, and we discovered that it was Iraq. So whatever your capability as an officer of a junior partner, nobody will ask your ideas, and you will have no means to affect the strategy. You can only affect the tactics with your units. You can try to make difference within your operational area. For Australians, that was Uruzgan or some other places. And they try to do it like that. And knowing that you are losing the war, you are still trying to win some battles. That's tough. That's tough. I mean, the whole Vietnam project was wrong. The whole Afghanistan project was wrong. Even if you win some battles, you lose the whole war and come to a difficult position as a veteran. Okay, what was wrong? Did I make something wrong? Did I this? I mean, as a junior partner, you did what you could able to do it. But related with the strategy, political aims, forget about it. You had no issues. Yes?
Thank you very much. Thank you. Sorry. Doctor, you mentioned the clash of cultures. Now, Indonesia and Turkey have both been held up to successfully countering a state that has no borders, namely extreme form of Islam, or as our Prime Minister said, a version of Islam. Can you comment on how your clash of cultures fits into the new scenario?
Okay, first of all, I don't believe Huntington's clash of cultures idea, because Huntington produced this as a kind of a new geopolitical theory. I don't believe that. Huntington tried to paint large areas, continents, with a single color. Huntington painted all Muslim countries in green. Huntington painted all Catholic and Protestant European countries in red. Huntington painted Orthodox Christians in brown. Huntington used different colors for Africa, for Latin America. Somehow he decided that Latin America is not good enough Catholic to be part of the European Catholic Protestant alliance. That's wrong. Turkey is a Muslim country, but Turkey is not as Iran, as Indonesia. Indonesia is not like Malaysia. And even the archipelago of Indonesia, if you jump from one island to another, you will come across different people and different understanding of Islam. Geopolitics is completely different issue. You cannot blend geopolitics with culture. Geopolitics means the effect of geography on politics. Huntington tried to replace geography with culture. The Huntingtian understanding of war of culture means the effect of culture on politics. That's rubbish. You cannot paint everyone in Australia with the same colors. Australia, although having a small population, has a large country. There are so many different people living in Australia, coming from different backgrounds, and even if they are coming from the same background because they are living in different cities, having different family histories, different professional experience, completely different ideas about Australia, about the world. That is why we have political parties. So, war of cultures, war of civilization, that was rubbish. But the worst part of it, the American leaders believe in it. And that was the reason they tried to wage the war in Afghanistan, in Iraq, by thinking that Islam is a monolithic body. All the Muslims have a sacred switch. When you click the switch, they transform into radicals. They brought humanitarian teams on the field, and they asked poor local people very scientific questions, and they tried to get some statistics out of it. It was so embarrassing. I mean, I was a general staff officer with IJC, and all the time I tried to escape from this. American scholars try to make some statistics, try to ask different questions. I always say, sorry, I'm busy, and I escape. I mean, I am writing an operational order, correcting mistakes, and one professor from Harvard saying that, do you have a time? I would like to talk with you because you are Turk, you are Muslim, you may be able to provide some input. Okay. Of course, I tried to be polite, but I said no. But in my mind, I spell out all the Turkish curse words I know. Yes, please.
An academic I did work on technical change and the impact it has on industries and behaviour. And I'm taking your initial There you go. I said Etzgeberet did work on technical change and industries and how technical change transformed competition. And I'm just picking up on your early comment about those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And I understand from an academic point of view, studying past wars and so on, and strategies and tactics is informative and interesting. But surely the impact of technical change between wars must severely limit how many lessons you can draw. Could you just give some examples? I mean, I suppose we could acquaint an elephant with a tank and say, you know, can we... But that's far too simplistic. How would you deal with that?
Okay. In essentials, all wars, regardless of time, technology, nations, are the same. The nature of the war is unchanging. The character may change, but forget about the color of the uniforms, forget about the national identities, forget about the time. All wars are the same because soldiers going to war, killing each other because the political leaders ordering them to do that. War is a tool of the politics. You use war to achieve your political aims. We want governments to use peaceful methods, trade, culture, tourism, aid, etc. But the governments, the political leaders from time to time got stuck, unable to find other peaceful tools. They make use of military forces. They make use of war to achieve their political aims. War essentially means violence. You kill people, you destroy their lands to achieve your political aims. This is not changing. The Persians attacked the ancient Greeks, 16th century, before Christ, to achieve their political aims. America went to Afghanistan to achieve its own political aims. You may question the validity of their aims. You may question about their strategy, but the basic mechanism of the war is the same. Violence, using violence to achieve political aims. You may use arrows, you may use swords, or you may use tanks, ballistic missiles. This may change the character of the war, but the essentials will remain the same. The issue is, I am using smartphone every day, and I don't understand the main technology behind it. I don't understand it, but I can use it. I mean, my daughter is making fun of how primitive I am in using this, but I am well satisfied. I am using it for communication, I am using for finding a place, the bus schedule, etc. I don't need to understand how this is functioning. Then why we are asking our officers how this ballistic missile functioning, what is the theory behind it? Does he or she need to know all the physical theories behind the weapons he is using? Okay, I passed through engineering education, so I can tell you the ballistics of a bullet, if you want. But that doesn't help me much while shooting the enemy. So the issue is, do we want technical experts fighting? Then let's close down our military academy and immediately hire computer scientists, force them to wear uniforms, send them on the field. We want officers that can command units, have an understanding of their weapons, some mastery of the tactics, techniques, but we want them to have an intellectual background to solve the future problems. The engineering approach destroying that. The engineering approach providing host goggles to the officers, they couldn't see it. And when they got into difficulty, they immediately complained that one weapon is not functioning, the ultraviolet goggles not functioning, their military computer collapsed, the communication is not functioning properly. They always try to blame the technology, their weapons, for their own failure. We don't want that. We want officers to have an understanding of war. We want officers to have an understanding about battles. We want officers to have an understanding about military leadership. We want officers having physical bravery, moral courage. And unfortunately, engineering training is not providing that. You can hire computer scientists, signal experts to perform some technical issues. Back in the day, during the medieval period, they hired Italian engineering families to do some very technical issues that their officers are unable to do it. And right now we have private military companies, not only in America, but also in Australia. Our armed forces hiring different companies to provide different services. I mean, you don't need a cook wearing a uniform, having a rank to prepare your meal. You can hire a civilian cook also. So, I mean, the issue is we need to approach the questions broadly. And we need to approach the issue that why we have officers, why we have very expensive academies. If we say, okay, let us put this component into it, let us put that component into it, then somebody would say, okay, why to have a military academy? Let us get all these officers from university graduates, give them a short military training, let them loose. Why we have very expensive ATFA? I mean, Australian government spending so much money for ATFA. It can open 3 universities, maybe 4 universities, by closing down ATFA and opening up. I mean, during 1890s, 1900, so many discussions took place between officers and political leaders in Australia. If I produce these main points, print them on paper, distribute it to you, some of you would say, this is good, this is what I am just thinking about it. They made these discussions 100 years ago, maybe more, and we are still making the same discussions. I mean, that is humiliating. We are still discussing the very basics of professional military education. That is so sad, tragic. The issue is that, I mean, we should be discussing something else, not the basics, but we are repeatedly discussing the same thing again and again. And when we got into difficulty, we raised our hand and say, the Americans are doing like that. You see West Point? So instead of showing our own reasons, Australian reasons, we are saying that, okay, the others are doing that, so we need to do that. Imitating.
Last question.
Chris, maybe
Captain, retired, never progressing. Very short question. Can artificial intelligence learn lessons from military history that can then be made better use of?
No.
Okay, the easy answer is no. As far as I am concerned, there is nothing we can call artificial intelligence. Okay, it is just memorizing. It is just memorizing. And as the computers doing it for many years. I mean, Microsoft Word correcting your mistakes for decades. And when you try to make use of artificial intelligence, so-called artificial intelligence, it is just because of its capacity, because of its speed, because of its connections with so many data banks, it can able to articulate an answer, but this is not the product of somebody thinking about it quickly and finding the answer. It is just memorizing so many things and using the simple copy and paste. And when it gets into difficulty, like our small kids, it is just saying lies. Lies. I mean, recently I came across an article citing one of my work. But the problem, I didn't write an article with that title. So somehow the artificial intelligence found me somebody authoritative enough with Turkish military history and providing a citation to me, but not my actual works, invented an article that I supposedly written and use it. I don't believe artificial intelligence right now. It may be something in the future. I mean, when I was small, I read lots of Isaac Asimov books. I like Isaac Asimov, but as far as I'm concerned, artificial intelligence is science fiction right now.
Thank you, Mr. David Lucy will now propose a vote of thanks.
As always, I think in our lectures, sometimes question time lifts the lecture to a new and more exciting level, and that is really extraordinary because the lecture itself was quite extraordinary. I might add that Secretary Mattis, as former General James Mattis, once was very pedantic about military reading. But he had a very wide reading list. For Iraq, he took in a 100-year-old text of Gertrude Bell. He wasn't worrying about being told how to run the military. I think he thought he could do that. What he wanted to know is what was the cultural background of the people he was dealing with, specifically tribe by tribe, which is why he took Gertrude Bell. And he is quite adamant that military history is not about spending 3 years at ACFA and therefore you've ticked the box, but rather it is a continuing reading program which fits you for whatever condition that you're going into. And I think that was the point that you were trying to make today, Professor, and I think it was made very well. And you have left us with a lot of things to think about, not just about military history, but the way we are running this country. Thank you.